what are influencers, right? What are social influencers? People who use products that then say, use what I'm using, and then that influences us to do what they're doing. Well, Kelly Slater influenced Adam Scott to try the technology in the putter, and eventually leads to Adam Scott putting it in his bag and helps Adam Scott. In the last 5 years, if you look at Adam Scott's putting stats before L.A.B golf and now after L.A.B golf, it's night and day. So the proof is actually in the pudding. Whether you buy a L.A.B or don't buy a L.A.B, I'm just telling you this is a hell of a story of how one thing leads to another, which leads to another, which leads to another, which leads to Lucas Glover going from push putting and a horrific case of the yips to winning back-to-back PGA Tour events.
Hi, this is Hugh Levinson from Danville, California, and I play golf at the Bridges Golf Course in San Ramon. This is Golf Smarter number 943.
TV personality, writer, and producer Matt Ginella on the Rags to Riches story of L.A.B Golf.
This is Golf Smarter, sharing stories, tips, and insights from great golf minds to help you lower your score and raise your golf IQ. Here's your host, Fred Green.
Welcome to the Golf Smarter podcast, Matt.
Thanks for having me, Fred. I appreciate it. Looking forward to the conversation.
I am too, because you have had a conversation that I've been following for weeks and weeks and weeks. I've been traveling. I was in Costa Rica. I was in the Deep South. And every time a new episode of your podcast, the FirePit Collective, comes up and you're doing this long form story on L.A.B golf, I'm like, I've got to listen to this because I'm a big fan of L.A.B golf. Sam's been on the show multiple times, all the way back to 2020. It was the first time he was on the show. And then you're doing this breakdown of the company, and I'm like obsessed.
We have that in common. Obsessed would be a good word to describe my interest in what I did, again, as I explained kind of in part one of this series, that I chose to kind of break up in different parts so that it's more consumable to the consumer. I'm not an equipment guy. I putted with the same putter for 15 years. Mm-hmm. I get offered to get fittings, and I definitely do it because getting fit is the right thing to do. But I literally play whatever they tell me I should be playing. I don't tinker with my guy. There's stuff in my bag. If it works, I don't swap it out. I'm always the believer that it's definitely the Indian, not the arrow, right? Like if something goes wrong, it's not the equipment's fault. It's
right.
my fault.
I completely agree.
And so I come at it from that. So I got introduced to Sam through a college friend at the PGA Merchandise Show, going back to what I believe was 2018. He had bought the company in 2018, so it would have been probably 2019 was when I actually met Sam. He showed me the revealer. I was like, I have no idea what I'm looking at. Things were flopping around. That stayed still. It all felt a little like pitchy to me. Mm-hmm. And again, for a non-equipment guy, I walked away. I called my buddy. I said, I met Sam. Looks really cool. I have no idea what we're talking about here. I have no idea what the technology. And that was it. That was it. That was the last. I mean, we might have had a slight correspondence. Send me a video and I'll give you but I never did it. That was the last interaction I had in and around L.A.B golf was January of 2019, Sam Hahn, while he's meeting, how many people he meets at a PGA Merchandise Show. I walked away. Wow. Now I follow Lucas Glover. We both have worn Link Soul forever. We have a mutual friend in John Ashworth and a mutual friend in Michael Sims. Plays out at Goat Hill Park if and when he's around town. So Lucas Glover has been somebody that I've followed. I know Lucas. We've had several long conversations out, in my time of traveling around and following golf. And this gets back to the obsession of where I'm going and our common denominator here, which is obsessed with L.A.B golf. I didn't know I was obsessed until I know what I know, right? And when I watched Lucas Glover struggle we all have, very infamously on the greens for years now, coming and going, on the verge of breaking 60, shooting 59, very infamously yips a putt from a couple feet away. And it gets shown, like, I can't even watch that. I can't even think about, like, and as Brett Rumford says in the series, this guy's on an absolute heater and yips a short putt to break 60. And he ends up push putting, literally soling the putter from behind the ball and essentially like pushing the putt towards the hole to try to prevent this yips, and goes on to win. And then with a L.A.B golf putter in his hand, wins back-to-back PGA Tour events in August of last year. That's when I called my buddy and I said, hold on. Remember you introduced me to that guy and he had that putter? Is this the same putter that we're talking about? He goes, yeah, that's L.A.B golf. That's Sam Hahn, who I introduced. And I said, that's what Lucas is using to win back-to-back tour events? He goes, yes. And I was like, I'm making some phone calls. I said, can you connect me to Sam? I want to understand what's going on. If that putter helped Lucas Glover cure those yips and win back-to-back PGA Tour events after push putting, what in the hell is going on here? And that's what started it all. And it was one.
So was it just a natural curiosity to learn more about it, or did you see a story that like, oh, I've got to flush this out?
No, well, I assumed there was a story, but then I got on with Sam. Sam said, this is 2 weeks after Lucas wins.
Right.
And I interviewed Sam even before they had announced the Ryder Cup players. So it was sometime around the Tour Championship, but before they had announced the Ryder Cup picks. And Sam agrees to do an interview with me. And 2 hours later, we finished the interview. I got 2 hours of Sam Hahn telling me the whole story of L.A.B golf.
And the stuff that he shares in those interviews, I was like, wait a minute. I've talked to Sam for hours. I didn't know any of this. It was so good.
He jumps off the page, right? Like, as you know, Sam is a colorful human being. He's a colorful character. He's obviously very smart. He's very articulate. He's passionate. He's passionate not only about life, but about his product, right? He literally, figuratively, financially, spiritually, emotionally bought into this company.
And to Bill Presse.
No, but so I didn't even know. I don't know Bill at all. So he mentions Bill, and I got and I go, so where is Bill? Like, in my mind, is Bill alive? Is Bill like some 85-year-old guy? I had no idea who Bill Presse was. I had no idea we bought him. And he goes, yeah, Bill's still, part owner of the company. Bill and I talk all the time. Bill's still alive. Where is he? He's in Reno. He moves around. I'm like, so I can get access to, so I have 2 hours with Sam and I'm going, wait, this guy is still alive. So not only is he still alive, Bill Presse has become one of my favorite people roaming the planet. Sam turns me on to Bill. So the next call I make is to Bill Presse, and he gives me 2 hours. So I have 2 hours of Sam and 2 hours with Bill. And I'm going, I might be sitting on one of the best stories I've ever told. And it's because, Fred, it's not just Sam's story and it's not just Bill's story. To me, the spokes that come out of, when Sam says there are 4 magic moments, okay, there's the idea that my putter broke, which is why I got on with Bill, which is then we created this chemistry, and then I bought in on the company. And then it's Vaughn Taylor that needed to get his card, that Sam happens to be out there late night one day at the Barracuda, and he gets the hand of Vaughn Taylor. Then there's Kelly Slater, who is impervious to sort of the looks and the bullshittery of like that's associated with like, oh, if it doesn't look good, I don't want to play it. Kelly Slater cuts through all that, because Kelly Slater is one of the most competitive human beings roaming the planet. He just wants to win. He just wants to get the ball in the hole. He just wants to putt well. He wants to beat the guy that he's playing. I don't care. He doesn't care who it is. So for him to use the directed force at Pebble Beach with his friend Adam Scott and putt better than anybody else in the group all week, and Adam Scott say, let me see that. Now it's Adam Scott using it, which then ultimately leads to Lucas Glover saying, give me what Adam Scott has. We're the same height. That trail and that narrative arc is what Sam articulated to me in the 2 hours of like, these are the 4 critical moments. And I'm like, well, if I drill down and tell all 4 of those stories, because I got access to Kelly Slater, he plays at Goat Hill Park. We have a lot of mutual friends. I've had a lot of, interaction with him so I'm like, if Sam can get me Bill and these guys can get me Vaughn Taylor, which I know, and I've covered Vaughn for his whole career. And then I can get to Kelly Slater, and then I can get to Adam Scott. Well, I know I can get to Lucas Glover. Now I've got the framework of being able to tell this whole narrative arc. And then it leads me, all those stories lead me into all other directions with a lot of other voices. And the FirePit podcast has always been one story told by multiple voices, piecing all these voices together to create one narrative arc. And it just so happens this is like an 8-hour narrative arc that I think spokes out into 10, 12, 14 different stories. Brett Rumford, I'd never heard of Brett Rumford. And Sam tells me about Brett Rumford. That's a whole nother story. Jason Kuhn is the Navy SEAL who helps. So it turns out Lucas Glover gets good at putting, not just by lab golf, but also through the mental training of a Navy SEAL sniper who overcame yips himself. So now I'm going like, oh my God, I can't stop. I'm 20.
But you have to. You have to stop right now. I'm going to take a break here because you've dropped.
You got to stop.
Right, exactly. But you've dropped so many names that I want to pick apart because of this amazing story in this podcast series that you're doing. But we're going to take a break, and we'll be back with Matt Ginella right after this. So what it blew my mind is what you just mentioned, that there's more episodes coming. But at the time we're recording this, just the last week listened to episode 8, and I was absolutely convinced that was the end of the series because you played the full song at the end of it. I'm like, okay, so that's a nice way to wrap it up because I love this song and it's perfect. Did you write the words to the song? I mean,
that's a Joe Horowitz song. Joe Horowitz is a good friend of mine. He is a golfer, very accomplished, professional who played on the Canadian Tour. Plays in the Met Golf Association. He's won some good events, but he's also a musician.
Yeah,
and he's a hell of a guitar player and a musician. And I got to know. He had the makings of a jingle. Essentially, he created the tune and for the podcast back in 2020 when we launched the FirePit podcast. And if you go back in the history of our podcast and go back to the episodes, I meet a guy at Jason Day's event by the name of Jakir King. He's a Grammy award-winning music producer, and avid golfer. And I paired Jakir King with Joe Horowitz, and they flushed out and built out that song, which is called The Story, that he then recorded in Nashville at Jakir King's music studio.
Wow.
And I did a podcast on the making of The Story. So there's actually a podcast that tells the story of the making of that song, which is called The Story, in which Jakir and Joe share how they work through and come up with, and we recorded them recording the story. The song.
I'm not one to promote other people's podcasts, especially golf podcasts. And so this is a rarity, but because I love this story so much. Now, and when I first saw FirePit, what does that have to do with golf, right? But now that you talk about how every episode is a story from multiple angles, from multiple voices, that now makes sense to me that it's just a bunch of guys sitting around a fire pit chatting.
That was the thought. And that also, it's not golf specific. It goes back to the beginning of time, people sitting around warmth and a fire, listening to or telling good stories of the day, of their life, of their career. It also allows me to go in different directions beyond just golf. I've got a multi-part series on the history, the life and legacy of Tony Gwynn. That's a passion project for me. I did one on Ken Griffey Jr. telling the story about back-to-back home runs with his father, in which so I've done some baseball podcasts.
Oh, I got to tell you my story.
Tony Gwynn and Ken Griffey are baseball. I've done stories about, Alan Shipnuck, how he got his job at Sports Illustrated and all the different sort of ebbs and flows. I've done a Walter Yost podcast on shooting the catch in the corner of the end zone, and Michael Jordan, all of the photos he's done following around Michael Jordan. So it allows me to just follow my nose. It allows me to be passionate about the stories I want to tell.
So being the journalist that you are. So I got to share. Yeah. I was telling you before we started recording, I told you my whole thing about fantasy play-by-play. I was in Seattle for a baseball game. Seattle Mariners were one of the teams that we did fantasy play-by-play. I was in the game. I was there for the night that Ken Griffey Sr. got a double. He's on second base. Junior comes up and hits a home run. Right? And, usually when a guy is on base and comes home and he's waiting for the guy who hit the home run, he slaps him on the butt and then they go in the dugout. Oh, no, not Senior. No, what does he do? He's the dad. He rubs his head. Like, good kid. I was like, oh, that was heaven. And after the game, I'm leaving with my friends who work for the team. Junior's behind me about 5 feet walking, and his dad's about 8 feet in front of me, and I'm right in the middle, and they're jawing back and forth to each other. And it's just the kind of stuff you can never remember, you never repeat, but you were there.
Well, it was one of the greatest thrills of my life. I tell Arnold Palmer's story in a podcast, that my last visit with Arnold Palmer 3 months before he died, by the way. That's a whole, and he tells a Roger Maris story that's worth, if anybody's listening and likes Arnold Palmer and Roger Maris, that's an incredible story about the 1960 Hickok belt. That's a whole nother story. I never got to meet Tony Gwynn. I never got to meet Vince Scully. These are my Mount Rushmore. These are my guys, right? But being able to interview Ken Griffey Jr. and he popped on, I popped on here on Riverside. He popped on screen for this Zoom sit down, and behind him are all of his gold gloves.
Oh, wow.
And he told me the story of being able to do that. As Tom Verducci says in the podcast, it's pretty safe to say this will never happen again. That father and son will play for the same team, be in a lineup back-to-back, and get an opportunity to hit back-to-back home runs. This is something that may never, ever happen again, and quite possibly would be one of the greatest sporting feats.
Yeah.
That, I'm a father now. I tell my son, I say, that's my boy, kind of a thing, right? Like, you're proud of, that's my guy.
Exactly.
The idea that you could be hitting in front of him and hit a home run, which that must feel amazing, hitting a home run in major leagues.
Yeah.
And to be then you go to the dugout and then to watch your son in the next at bat, I think it was a 3-0 pitch, knock it out of the park.
Amazing.
That of all the things, I don't know how many episodes I'm in and whatever. I mean, that conversation with Ken Griffey Jr. and that opportunity to talk baseball and golf, by the way, avid golfer. And he tells me a story about how he and his dad played golf with Tiger and his dad.
Oh, wow.
Which is a cool story in itself. Ken Griffey Jr., I was never a Mariners fan, but I was a baseball fan, and he's he's up there for me.
Man, you are like one of the greatest flies on the wall in history.
It's good to be. It's that's a good place to be. It's a good place to
Yeah.
be when you're. I love to observe life. I love to listen. I love to watch and see what's moving around me. And the idea to be able to do that with these types of people, and Sports Illustrated, Golf Digest, Golf Channel has provided me those opportunities in life. And even going back to St. Mary's College, where the Warriors practiced their basketball, which I got to meet Tim Hardaway and Chris Mullin and Latrell Sprewell and all those.
Was that during Run TMC, right?
Run TMC, Mitch Richmond. That was it was a cool time to be. So going way back, and then even in Santa Rosa, California, I grew up working at a golf course where Charles Schultz played. So I was always like enamored and impressed and taught. You got to look around, look what's going on around you, and don't be afraid to listen. As someone always told me when I was growing up, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use the ears twice as much as you use the mouth.
Right on.
I don't know if I do that, but I try.
Well, as I've been doing this for years, I like to look for stories too. I love to try to flush out and find outrageous stories. And one of the most outrageous, and I don't know if you've ever heard this one because it seemed like no one ever had, but there was the kid who, San Francisco-based kid, working, liked playing golf and wanted to get out there someday and thought, God, I would love to play in a national championship, but I'm not that good. He ends up sneaking into North Korea and plays in the North Korean Open Championship. And tells this whole story about how he did it. I can't remember his name right now, and I'll tell you after we're done here. But it's an incredible story. When we finished, I said, "So, and when you got home back to San Francisco, what did you do?" He said, "I went back to work." And I'm like, have you told anybody this story?" He goes, "I don't think so." I'm like, "What do you mean no?" He says, "I just went back to work. I didn't tell anybody about it." It's an incredible story.
That to me is a story that, just like L.A.B, to go back to L.A.B, that story ended up inspiring so many other questions that then lead to more stories. See what I'm saying? Like, I could have just clipped off Sam Hahn and ran that podcast in 3 parts, 2 hours, and just taken Sam Hahn's perspective. But to me, once he told me Bill was still alive, I was like, I got to hear Bill. Bill invents the revealer in his garage, which then leads to him, this guy was homeless in 2000. He lost the mother of his daughter, at some point in his life. He was living out of his car, selling putters out of the trunk of his car. I'm going, what? And then this leads to Lucas Glover going back to back on the PGA Tour. Like, I'm like, incredible. What? So I knew where I was going to end, which is Lucas Glover. I knew where I was going to begin, which was Bill Presse.
You had no idea what the journey was.
Everything else happened in between.
All right. And we're going to talk more about that because now I want to bring in some of the names that you talked to and how they fit in the story, but we're going to do that after this. Did you ever think that this podcast series on L.A.B golf was going to be a book? Because like Malcolm Gladwell will write a book, but he got all enamored with podcasting and turned his books into audiobooks to, podcasts. And it's really brilliant. And this series, now 8 parts, and sounds like there's going to be more, it plays like it's an audiobook. The way you have the stories going in and out of one another and the people all speaking, but you get to live with it because you're hearing their voices. I love it so much. It's a patio book is what it is. It's amazing.
Well, thank you, first of all, for listening and doing this and for saying all that you're saying. I don't think of anything I don't think of it like that at all. Like in my mind, and we talked a little bit about this offline, but my roots go back to radio, the romance of creating an audio experience. Like, it literally is emotional for me to even talk about, honestly. Because no, really, it is. I mean, as a kid, and my parents have, there used to be these little mini recorders. My dad used to commute from Santa Rosa to San Francisco every morning. He rode the bus. These are the 1970s. Okay,
Wow.
late 1970s. I'm
No traffic then.
8 years old, 9 years old. He'd leave the house at a time at like 4:35 in the morning, and he'd get home at 8 o'clock at night. That's but by bus, Fred.
Mm-hmm.
This is a man who he set up his family in Santa Rosa because that's where he could afford a bigger house because he had 5 kids. I'm youngest of 5 kids, and I
Makes sense.
I was a Padre fan. He was a Giants fan, and I would create fake games, make up games on a recording, put them by my bedside at night, and he'd take those in the morning and listen to them on the bus when he was going to and from work. And I would create the Padres would win one game, the Giants would win. I created like an ongoing series, and sometimes I'd love Padres won most of the games, but he would take those and listen to those as a kid. My dream job was to be the Padres radio announcer. So going back to, play-by-play announcer. So going back to, Jerry Coleman obviously was famous. I thought, how am I going to get Jerry Coleman's job? So now we have Jesse Agler, who was like one of the best in the business. And I love that he's so good, but I hate that he's so good because it means I'll never get his job. You know what I mean? But I love listening. People, Vin Scully, again, like I said, you can't say that name enough. A man who could do both aspects of play-by-play and color commentary.
And, I think about Vinny a lot, and I'm sorry about this aside. I want to get to Kelly Slater. I think about Vinny a lot because the way they have sped up the baseball game, which I think is a beautiful thing, the only one who I think doesn't like it are the announcers, right? Because it's like they're storytellers. They want to tell stories. They want the pace so they can tell. And Vinny was the master, the professor of all that. Would he be able to do it?
Well, yeah,
of course he would.
Yes, he did, because games didn't used to take 3 now. He did it. He did it by himself. I mean, he did these broadcasts by himself. He had that ability to weave a story in and out of the actual broadcast, so you could, and you keep you in touch and informed. So, I mean, the guy is capable of everything, anything. I mean, would you bet against Vince Scully being able to do anything? No,
nothing, of course not. Okay.
And I think his art and you know what he never stopped doing? He never stopped reporting the details. The one thing that I don't think there's no shortcut to the reporting. You know what I'm saying? I think there's a lot of people who cut corners, who don't go out down on the field.
Well, these are the announcers that grew up with television, so they don't think they need to talk as much as the guys who did radio.
Yeah.
Right?
There's a lot of color commentators who end up saying the same thing that the good play-by-play guy said, just in a little different way.
Yeah.
They miss opportunities to weave in their own personal experiences. Like an ex-baseball player is there to bring X experiences and insight into the broadcast that the play-by-play guy isn't doing. But if the color commentator ends up saying what the play-by-play guys, then they're not doing their job. And the play-by-play, so that's why Vince Scully was genius. He told you about what's happening in the game, and he told you the extra layers of the stories of the players who played the game. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
If you're a fan of Vince Scully, you probably are disappointed with most broadcast teams because you're like, Vince Scully did better as one man than most people do as two people.
Yes. No question about it. All right. I want to get to Kelly Slater because you talk about Kelly Slater and his competitiveness, but this is not a golfer that he's not known as a golfer, right? But he seems to be influential on the highest level of golf.
Well, you could argue Kelly Slater is the greatest living athlete. Michael Jordan, 6 NBA championships, Tiger Woods, 15 major championships, Jack Nicklaus, 18 major championships. You got Wayne Gretzky, who, owns most every, record that matters in the world of hockey. And But Kelly Slater has 11 world championships in surfing. That's I think the next best has 5 or something. That guy did it in the 80s. I give the stats in the podcast. Kelly Slater is a machine at his craft. He's next level. Okay. And therefore he's an incredible athlete, and he's a scratch golfer. And there are golfers who love to surf, and Adam Scott is one of them.
Okay. Australian.
And so they've been on surf trips together. They're good friends. Like they're friends.
Okay, so that's why they're playing together at AT&T.
They play at AT&T, and Kelly Slater, is legitimately a scratch golfer. Like he can flat out play golf.
Clearly.
Hand-eye, spiritual. When there's no waves, what do surfers do?
They play
golf.
Yeah.
In places like Hawaii, windy, Florida, windy, they're going to play, they're traveling the world, and they play golf. Well, Slater is one of the best. And so when he finds a directed force and he starts making all these putts, and Tommy Armour says to him, don't ever take that thing out of your bag. And he develops a relationship with Sam Hahn. As Slater says, what are influencers, right? What are social influencers? People who use products that then say, use what I'm using, and then that influences us to do what they're doing, right? Well, Kelly Slater influenced Adam Scott to try the technology in the putter, and eventually leads to Adam Scott putting in his bag and helps Adam Scott. In the last 5 years, if you look at Adam Scott's putting stats before L.A.B golf and now after L.A.B golf, it's night and day. So the proof is actually in the pudding. Like, this is not, I'm not trying to, whether you buy a L.A.B or don't buy a L.A.B, I'm just telling you this is a hell of a story of how one thing leads to another, which leads to another, which leads to another, which leads to Lucas Glover going from push putting and a horrific case of the yips to winning back-to-back PGA Tour events.
In these 19 years that I've been doing this, I've had lots of small manufacturers on. And I always know that it's like, it's a shame, but unless this gets seen on tour, unless this has some success on tour, it's not going to translate very well to the public. And there's been a couple of companies that have, this has potential, but there's been nothing like L.A.B golf. And again, it's the magic of Sam Hahn. It's the personality, the captivation of his passion that brings that out. But again, the proof is in the pudding, starting with the revealer that shows all this nonsense about toe balanced, heel balanced, face balanced, whatever. It's all malarkey. It's all bull.
It's marketing. Yeah. There's probably a toe hang putter actually hangs with the toe facing, towards the ground.
Right.
And a face balanced putter actually, hangs with the face facing up to the air. So, but how does that translate into something in which you are creating this torque as you're going back and forth? And, you know what I'm saying? Like that. So it takes Bill Presse to kind of like part the clouds of the marketing mumbo jumbo, but then it takes Sam's marketing of L.A.B to try to get it up and out there and articulate it in a way, because Bill would be the first one to admit, like, he saw through the bullshittery of the marketing of the OEMs, but the company was going to go out of business if Sam doesn't come in and try to help it in a way that then articulates in a way that people can understand and are willing to use.
Right. Bill had a skill set, but it wasn't being a businessman.
No. And by the way, he's doing a lot of different things. He's juggling, life, and so as someone who has now gone on to start my own business, it's like there are strengths and weaknesses of people, as a business owner and operator. Your key is to surrounding yourself with the people who are better at the things that you're not good at, right? If you can't get that done in a way and timely fashion, then you're going to go out of business. Bill, Sam needed Bill, but Bill needed Sam. And Sam has needed a lot of people in his universe and his ecosystem to try to make this work. His own hustle, but then a lot of buy-in from people that work with him. And there are others. So you talk about other episodes still coming. There's one episode in particular. The story is done. The story has been told on Lab Golf. That's 8 episodes.
Yeah.
There is more stuff in there that I want to share with the audience who's willing to learn.
Like what?
Well, if you listen, Sam talks about how Brett Rumford, this short game guru in Australia,
yep,
who's like widely respected and considered one of the best at what he does from a short game standpoint and understands technology in ways that, probably Bill Presse does. Brett Rumford was the one who came to Sam and said, I get it now. I understand what you have to do with a Lab Golf putter. You've got to let go of control to gain control. You've got to get out of the way of the technology. You've got to stop your instinct to manipulate and create torque with the putter in order to actually reap the benefits of this technology. Let go of control to gain control. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. Sam tells me that. Every single person I interviewed, and there's 18 people I interviewed, I asked, what does it mean to you to hear let go of control to gain control? So I am going to do one additional episode in which you're going to hear every single person I interviewed give their perspective on let go of control to gain control as it relates to putting, life, Lab Golf. Everybody has their own, Kelly Slater's perspective on that is different than Brett Rumford's, which is different than Bill Presse's, which is different than, Vaughn Taylor's, which is different than Tim Wilkinson's, which is different than, all of these different people I interviewed.
Perfect.
And so that's going to be a bonus episode, number 9. And number 10 is to give a chance to Sam to come back on. It might be 20 minutes, it might be 4 minutes to say,
oh, it's Sam. It'll be an hour.
And I'll just say, Sam, what did I get right? What did I get wrong? Who needs special call outs? Who did I miss?
I was going to do that. Okay. You get to do that.
Yeah. Well,
So Sam, we need to talk about the fire pit.
Yeah. Well, no, I want to hear. I mean, I interviewed him in August of 2023. This is April of 2024. I want to know, as he's listened, going back to his own story, and I probably will have Bill on. I probably will do one more with Sam and Bill to say, what are your thoughts, reflections? Bill says he's getting noticed now at PJ Superstores and saying, oh my God, you're the guy, because he's always been way behind the scenes, and the guy who was in his garage. And,
don't look behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that this is going to be the summer that I can do this. I've been trying to do it for a couple of years, but I've been wanting to take from Northern California and take a road trip up to Eugene to go see Sam and see his factory and see the place. So I'm hoping I get to do that this year. But your thing about let go of control, I'm going to pick up on that, but we're going to take one last break. Maybe, we both have hard stops here. But we're going to do that. We'll be back after this. So there's a couple of running themes that is going on through the entire series. And again, to my podcast audience, please, if you've been intrigued by Sam Hahn and the conversations I've had with him, I know that many people in the audience have picked up a Lab Golf putter since being introduced to Sam. But you've got to listen. Again, I don't promote other podcasts, but you've got to listen to FirePit Collective and this long series on Sam Hahn and Lab Golf. And one of the things, let go of control to gain control. Another theme that you have running through it, especially late, that I just was blown away by was this isn't a golf story. This is a sports story. And that's about Lucas Glover, right?
Yeah, because I think there's a winner on the PGA Tour every week, right? There's someone who breaks through and wins, and they sometimes they're better stories than others. Sometimes it's it's someone who has won several times. Sometimes it's someone who broke through and got a Monday qualified and then got there's a variety, and those stories are being mitigated at this point because of the structure of men's professional golf, which is a whole nother story. But I think that when you take a Lucas Glover winning once at the Wyndham Championship was a really that was a great golf story. But when he came back and won it back to back, when he won the first FedEx Cup playoff event, to me it became a sports story. This then becomes transcendent. And that's what then starts becoming on SportsCenter. It's like this guy went from, again, horrific case of the yips, playing out in a public forum, and all the stuff that he was dealing with. And everybody can relate to sort of just being ridiculed and down and being questioned. And what are you doing? Why are you doing it? You're done. Hang it up. Get off my TV screen, essentially. I mean, what Lucas Glover endured was insane.
Yeah.
To going to winning not just one, but then following it up the next week, to me, became a sports story. And I think that's something anybody who follows sports, it becomes even more than a sports story to me. This becomes, as I talked to Lucas about,
a human story.
It's a human story. His grandfather instilled a work ethic and that family DNA in him, right? Like cultivated that. The Harmon brothers are involved, Dick Harmon specifically. Then Lucas, was a baseball player. He's a good athlete. He comes from a family of athletes, and he started playing golf as Mac Barnhart, his agent and life friend coach, said, I knew this kid was different from the beginning. This is a guy who has, with 10 years of dealing with putting woes, has kept his PGA Tour card.
That's what Sam was reiterating. He's like, he had the yips for 10 years and kept his card. That's unheard of.
Doesn't happen. That's how gritty and grindy Lucas Glover is. And then Sam has a great point in there. There was a level of acceptance for Lucas to be, and Jason Koon. By the way, we also get to hear the story of a Navy SEAL sniper. I get chills saying that out loud, right? This is a guy who...
That was my next question, is like, how did a Navy SEAL end up in this story?
Because, and again, I don't know. When I make that first call to Sam, I have no idea where I'm going. But Sam leads to Bill, and Bill leads to, we talked to Vaughn Taylor, and I'm Kelly Slater and Adam Scott, and then I get to Lucas Glover, and Mac Barnhart goes, L.A.B golf and the putter is critical. But before we got to the putter, we had to fix something bigger with Lucas. And that was done through Jason Koon. And I'm like, how do I get to Jason? I couldn't even start the series unless I got this Navy SEAL who got in with Lucas and helped him train his mind, because Jason Koon didn't even know what the yips was. He ended his very, legitimate college baseball career because of the yips. He didn't even know what it was. He just stopped being able to throw. He's throwing the ball over the backstop. And he's like, I don't even know what it is. And he goes, then he leaves baseball and he goes into the military and he becomes a Navy SEAL. And he gets through all the training and becomes a Navy SEAL. And he says to himself, the yips can't be a byproduct of being mentally weak if I'm mentally strong enough to become a Navy SEAL. Therefore, this can't be a mental hurdle that needs to be solved. It's got to be something else. Let me dig down to. So he backtracks from the idea that I'm not mentally weak. Therefore, this is not a mental issue. What is the yips? He does a deeper dive and figures it out. and helps Tyler Matzik of the Atlanta Braves overcome the yips and go on to pitch and win a World Series. And he's like, I'm on to something. And he has created his own business. And I think he's 40 for 40 is what he says in the interview, of helping people overcome something that he didn't even know what it was called back when he was dealing with it, called the yips. And he helped Lucas Glover not only transform his mind, but then also try the L.A.B putter mid-season. And this is what ends up becoming back-to-back wins. There's just so many. Was one big, just long puzzle piece. And
that's why it's a book. I mean, that's why it plays like a book.
But see, going
like a
back,
novel.
We never really finished it. But like, I don't think of it. I don't think, is it a book or is it like, to me, it's just a story. And I prefer to tell my stories with an audio experience. Some people prefer to tell their stories as books, as novels, and then read those books as an audio experience. For me, my script. If you look at my script that I have of L.A.B Golf, is 18,000 words long. But that's not including the actual quotes of the people. So if I translate, if I got the transcript of the whole series and turned it into a book, it would be a book. I could take that audio experience and turn it into a book. Some people turn books into audio experiences, right. But I don't even look at it like that. I just look at it as I prefer to tell this story in an audio form, because going back to what we're talking about, my roots and what I love and the romance of a radio experience is where I started.
Yep. I know it well. A couple of weeks ago, we had Jim Waldron on. Jim is a regular, been on probably more than any other golf instructor I've ever had on the show. And he's based out of Portland. And he's a phenomenal coach, but he also refers to himself as the Yips Whisperer. I call him the Yoda of Yips. But I told him, I said, I've got a podcast episode you have to listen to. And I turned him on to your show, said, I want you to listen to the whole series if you can, but listen to this specific episode because it's all about the yips. And he was very excited about that.
And was that the Jason Kuhn episode?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think my wife and family are probably very tired of me talking about all of this, but this has
you can talk to me, Matt. It's okay.
I call you very often. But no, I think, and my son has listened, because what happens is we're driving back and forth to San Diego, or I'm taking him to school. We get Tim in the car. That's my time to listen to podcasts. Sometimes I'm listening to my own podcast before we hit send on the finished product. And my son has probably heard, my 6-year-old son has probably heard this podcast, each episode, at least 2 or 3 times. He also likes to sit on my lap and listen in. It's probably in his DNA, right? Like, I don't know, we're all byproduct of we're product of our environments. So he sings the song, the theme song. He's picking up on Lucas Glover. He's hearing all these different things, and it's a really neat experience to actually be going through this with him as we're rolling all these different episodes out. I hope he's picking up some of the life lessons that are learned from this, which is never give up. As Lucas says, this is about his son 8, his daughter 11. He actually got to show them that never give up, because anything and everything is possible by actually doing it himself instead of just saying it, right? He actually showed them. And if you hear the broadcast and then, Daddy, you won, Daddy, you won, Daddy, that was making me, I cry when I listen to that. And it's just that simple, right? Lucas did it for himself, to prove it to himself, but also to prove it to his own kids, that what I say to you is not just talk, it's I walk the walk.
Yeah. If it helps at all, my older son, who's 41 now, when I was first starting with my fantasy play-by-play, and he was a little boy, and I was doing everything myself, all the design work, all the production, everything. And he would stand over my shoulder and watch the design stuff, and he would make comments, and he always had really brilliant insights to, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. It translates to his work today. That's not what he does, but he still has a great eye. And I attribute it to spending that time with him. So your son, he's going to be good. It's going to be okay.
He's already an observer of life. My wife and I marvel at the way he takes in what's moving around him. He's learning from a lot of older people in his life by virtue of our travels and our experiences and the people we move around with. He's got a lot of great, mentors and people who have a vested interest in him as a human being. And so by virtue of that, we don't have to do as much, coaching or parenting, because he's being raised by a village of really good human beings. And
awesome.
And we see him as a byproduct of all of that. And that's true for all of our kids. And it's
a magical time too. 6 years old. That's pretty great.
That's it. They're sponges. So we got to watch
without the attitude. They'll get the attitude. He'll get the attitude, but not yet. So I need to go to one more place with you because, and I thought we'd be able to talk about the show, but I didn't realize it was going to be this good. But we just announced recently that we're going to be doing a Golf Smarter adventure, and we're going to Northern Ireland. And so I watched your video of Ginella's journeys about the best of Belfast on and off the course. And so I need to get a couple of hits because some of the courses that you went to were playing, and we're going to be doing this in July of this year with just me, and we had 2 foursomes we're going to, me and 7 Golf Smarter listeners. So Royal County Down, give me quick hits because I know you got to go soon. Some quick hits about what we need to know about these courses we're playing. Royal County Down. Well,
Royal County Down is top of the mountain. That's at the base of the mountains of Mourne. You're looking at one of the best. It's in the conversation for being one of the best golf courses in the world. So Royal County Down is top of the top. About 35 minutes from Royal County Down is one of my favorite places on earth, which is Ardglass. So don't go to
which
Royal
we're also
County.
playing.
Well, great. So Paul Vaughn, the pro there, is just one of the kindest, most gracious human beings on earth. I try to help people navigate not just the golf course, right? This is a good golf course. It's about the experience to me. Again, going back to what we're talking about from podcasts, to me, all of it is an experience. Life is an experience. And we gravitate towards what feels good as an experience and not just I love that par 4 or I birdied that hole. That's great. Those are little highlights within the experience itself. But Royal County Down, Ardglass, Portrush, Port Stewart,
Portrush.
Some of these places, they're going to provide great experience. Ireland, and I group Northern Ireland. There is a fundamental difference and a cultural difference between Northern Ireland and Ireland. Us as North American consumers, only if you really go often and talk to a lot of people within town would you really ever kind of know. You're going to change currency. There's going to be different flags up as you cross over borders, different license plates on the cars, but it's not really something that's going to actually impact your experience, so to speak. To me, the Irish, still at their core, are incredibly warm, hospitable human beings. And they are very proud, and they want to make sure that you have a great experience. So those courses, Castle Rock.
Well, another one that we're playing that you covered in the video, I was like, oh my God, it's a parkland course. Look at all those trees, was Royal Belfast.
Royal Belfast. So a whole different type of experience that you're going to have at Royal Belfast.
I was shocked to see that shot.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, and the Irish will point out to you that there's a small percentage of golf courses that are actually links courses. There is a lot of parkland courses in Ireland.
Oh, okay.
We, as North American consumers used to parkland golf and have to, kind of go to the places like Bandon Dunes to find links golf, true links golf. There, it's a little more prominent than here. They have more. They've developed more land there as links golf than we have here. So we gravitate towards those links experiences because it's so much more unique to us. To them, they're playing. Most of them actually tend to play. Most consumers in Ireland will tend to play parkland because it's less expensive, and it's more prominent, and it's more more their home club, so to speak.
Well, so it sounds like we're on a good set of courses to be playing on this trip.
You are. You're
playing 5 different courses. We're also playing Royal Belfast.
Okay, so your exact itinerary is
Ardglass, Royal Belfast, Royal County Down, Royal,
Portrush,
and Portrush, right?
And Port Stewart.
Not Stewart. No.
Hard to imagine you'd play Portrush without playing Port Stewart. See if there's any way you can at least play the front 9 at Port Stewart. So in that show, Ginella's Journeys to Belfast, I got to play with Des Giffen, who is the former teacher of, and has spent time with Ricky Elliott, who's Brooks Koepka's caddy, and Graham McDowell. And he essentially, for a couple pints of beer, designed that front 9 at Port Stewart. And it's a couple miles away from Portrush. You're going to want to go to the Harbor Bar, meet Crazy Willie in between Portrush and Port Stewart. And there's a great little restaurant behind that bar. You can have a good meal there. You're going to want, while you're near Ardglass, you're going to want to see St. Patrick's grave. This is the patron saint of Ireland. He's buried there at a church right around the corner from Ardglass. And, I don't care what kind of religion that's a pretty significant moment in the history of life. And St. Patrick's Day is celebrated all over the world. That guy is buried right there. So that's an incredible experience. Game of Thrones has been shot in and all around. Go to Titanic Belfast, go take 2 hours, do the tour of Titanic Belfast, and you want to be moved. Talk about, it's an audio and visual experience, and go through what is widely considered one of the greatest tourist attractions in the world, Titanic Belfast. Wow. Thank me later. Wow. Make time for it. If you have a rainy day and you don't want to go out on the golf, go to Titanic Belfast. You'll thank me.
Will do. Well, listen, clearly we're cut from a lot of the same cloth in many ways. And one of them is that we prefer to ask the questions than to be asked. And you were a little anxious about being a guest on a podcast, but well done, my friend. You did an incredible job. I really enjoyed having you on the show.
Well, thanks for having me. It's an honor, honestly. And I know of you, and Sam told me great things, and obviously you're great at what you do. This is a very neat opportunity to just talk about the audio experience in general, but also this podcast that I really enjoyed putting together. It is not just a story. It's several very good stories that happen to be a part of what is L.A.B Golf's story, but it's also the Lucas Glover, and it's Jason Kuhn, and it's Vaughn Taylor, who kept his card because of L.A.B, and it's Kelly Slater, who still putts with a directed force, and it's all these different little nooks and crannies, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about it.
And by the way, if you've never heard the episode that Matt and I had discussed about the young man who played in the North Korean Open Championship, that was published in September of 2016 as episode number 558, called "The 19 Handicapper That Played in a Country's Open and Lived to Tell About It." His name was Justin Krybeck. And when people ask me, what were your favorite episodes after doing over 900? That one is definitely on my Mount Rushmore of Golf Smarter conversations. And speaking of Mount Rushmore of guests, clearly Tony Manzoni is up on that pedestal, not just for me, but for you as well. Just this past week, I've received emails that said, I love this time of year with the Tony Manzoni replays. And another one read, every time I listen to Tony's single pivot method, it gets a little clearer. And just this morning, I received an email from Sweden that included, I wanted to extend my gratitude for providing such insightful content on Tony Manzoni and his Lost Fundamental. Being published this Friday will be our 5th installment of the 2024 Spring into Golf season with Tony Manzoni, and the second in a row that we've never repeated before. Here's a taste.
And I'm not going to say that every player that plays for me plays off the left side, but a lot of them have changed to it. And when I explain it to them, they realize that mathematically it makes sense. It's not theory. It's just that, look, if we got to get to the left side when we hit the golf ball, the farther we get to the right, the harder it is to get to the left. There's a whole bunch of things happening on that downswing that you've got to time, and we want to eliminate timing as much as we can in the golf swing. And so if we can rotate on a axis instead of two but one, if we can trap the club against our body via the connection of our arms to our body, then as we rotate, the club face stays square through impact. And it's easy to do physically.
So that's this Friday's episode of Golf Smarter, when we dip into our vault of helpful and entertaining conversations. If you'd like to receive a copy of Tony's video, that could be your payoff for becoming a Golf Smarter ambassador. Do just what Hugh Levinson of Danville, California did at the top of the show by telling us where he's from, where he plays, and what episode we're listening to. And when you do, you'll have a choice of gifts. So if you're interested, just write to me, golfsmarterpodcast@gmail.com, and I'll write back with some simple instructions of what to do and what to say. It's easy, and it's a way to tell your buddies that you're on the Golf Smarter podcast. Hey, I was on a podcast this week. They're like, what? Anyway, now Hugh Levinson lives in Danville, California, which isn't that far from me, so I'm hoping to join him to play the Bridges Golf Course out in San Ramon. Actually, I've also played a course called the Bridges just outside of St. Louis before. I wonder how many courses have that name, the Bridges. Anyway, I'd like to play with you too, and have always requested that if you're in or coming to the San Francisco Bay Area and want to play together, I'd love to meet you. But why wait for you to come to me? Let's go play this July in Northern Ireland. We talked a lot about it already. Matt gave you some great insights to these courses, and we still have room for you to join us. And there's only room for 2 foursomes. So let's do this because we're going to have a great time. Again, the trip is July 2 through 9, 2nd through the 9th of 2024, for 5 rounds that includes Royal County Downs, #1 course in the world. Other courses include Royal Portrush, Ardglass, Royal Belfast, and Ballyliffin. But the clock is ticking. You can get the full itinerary and pricing at tmigolf.com/golfsmarter. That's tmigolf.com/golfsmarter. And I'll leave a link in the show notes. So I've been saying this closing line for almost 20 years now, and just yesterday, I received an email asking if I'm open to suggestions for guests. Yes! Doing this show every week requires the greatest resources in the world, and that's you. So if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for upcoming episodes, or need more information and want to discuss our royal adventure this July, please write to golfsmarterpodcast@gmail.com or click on the Hey Fred button when you visit golfsmarter.com.